In order to get the edge in the next format, Branded is gonna have to play some non-engine cards, and notoriously, Branded does not have a lot of non-engine slots. So how do you choose the ones that are most impactful and the ones that you should actually play in your deck? Well, here are 5 options that you can consider. If you want 5% off any single or sealed product, head over to tier0games.com and use code GALZO5 at checkout. How's it going, YouTube? Welcome back to another video. We're on the way to 10K, so hit that subscribe button, please, if you haven't still, and of course, like the video if you like this type of content. And today we're going to talk about branded tech cards for the upcoming Cyberstorm Access format. As you're watching this, Cyberstorm Access is already OTS legal, but I did want to maybe share my thoughts on what I think are some tech cards that you guys can play in your deck, and the ones that I'm testing currently for my Nationals, which is less than a week away. And of course, Branded doesn't really have a lot of non-engine slots, so we need to consider whether these cards are in the side deck or in the main deck and how we actually get the most value off of these cards. And I think that, first of all, I want to address hand traps in general because I know these comments will come up. I think hand traps, especially the ones that you can actually run in Branded, probably don't do enough. Some cards in your non-engine slots need to be more impactful. Things like Droll and Kaijus are probably the way to go in terms of going second cards, rather than an Ash or an Imperm that just don't do enough. But we're here to talk about tech cards, so let's start with the first one, and I'm going to talk about Triple Tactics Talent. And I think this card has seen some play, probably more play than Thrust at this point, but not really necessarily in Branded by any means. And when I started testing for the national season that is right around the corner, I thought about the question that is on every Branded player's mind: how do I not lose to Ash? And as I started playing more and more games, I realized that a lot of players are playing more hand traps than they did in the last format, which means that Veilers and Drolls are much more prominent, even Gammas, and you might actually get hand trapped before you activate Branded Fusion. So that got me thinking, what if people play a lot of hand traps and, you know, they're kind of frivolous with them, they're throwing it at everything because Aluber is a good Veiler target, and even, you know, Cartesia in the hand is a good Gamma target. Then maybe if I play Talents, then, you know, I can take that first hand trap, look at the hand, take out another hand trap, and then play. I think this has really proven itself in my testing. It's something that I'm still considering, but I'm even considering it for the main deck because a lot of options that play around Ash are like the Deer Servant, Cross-Out Designator, even like Aqua Dolphin sometimes. And I think that actually in a format that is so hand trap heavy, Talents can actually punish your opponent for playing hand traps that they probably shouldn't against Branded. The second one I want to talk about is actually a side deck card, and it's actually a trap card as well, and it's There Can Be Only One. I think that There Can Be Only One really excels in Branded and has always been the best sort of like a floodgate trap that you could play in Branded. Why? Because your end board and most of your deck is just composed of different types. You could play under things like Rivalry if you just play dragons, for example, but in Branded you have your fairy starters, you have your spellcaster extenders, and of course you have your end bosses, which are usually dragons and worms, which means that you can end on a pretty good end board and actually set Tikaboo, which is There Can Be Only One, and prevent your opponent from playing. But it's not only your boards, it's actually the decks that you're playing against. So think about top 3 decks that are currently going to be facing Branded, or even 4. You have Mathmech, which is a Cybers deck. You have Super Heavy Samurai, which is a Machine deck. You have Kostiar, which is a Psychic deck. And you have Pearly, which is a Fairy deck. All of those decks are the top decks in the current format, and, well, they all lose to There Can Be Only One. Most of these decks are not actually ready, and of course, going first tech cards like Gimmick Puppet Nightmare are really good, but also you can play, in addition to that, an additional win condition like Tikaboo and actually win the game just by knowing your matchups. The other side tech option, it could be main, but it's probably side for going second, is actually Dino Wrestler Pancratops. I think that this card, even if it's at 1, usually you would have that 1 slot in your side deck that you can fit in an additional tech card. I think Pancratops is actually insane. I'm going to be posting a replay versus Super Heavy Samurai, and I think Pancratops in general super good against things like Floodgates and back row, of course, which, you know, anti-spell fragrance and stuff like that really hurt the deck. Even Super Ancient Organism, which is a real death sentence to Branded most of the time, it takes care of that. Also, it can just trade with an interaction on the field. It doesn't really prevent you from doing anything because you can special summon it, you can also extend through it. But most importantly, things like Spell Canceller are actually really vulnerable to things like Pancratops because, you know, you can special summon the Pancratops, attack, tribute it in the battle phase to, you know, play around the Veiler or something like that, and then you can take out another interruption, for example, Baron de Fleur, and then with one card you took out really like 2 insane threats to the deck and play. I think this has been proven in my testing to be a really solid card, and yeah, you should definitely check it out if you have that one slot on your side. Number 4 is going to be Dimension Shifter, and of course we all hate that card, but there is some sort of interaction with this card that is really solid. I think this is also probably a side deck card. It's really good against super heavy Pearlies and even Math Mech most of the time. You turn off their graveyard and it's really hard for them to play. But what happens when you turn the graveyard off for yourself? Then you can also play a package of Dragoon. Dragoon is really good when you're playing things like Dimension Shifter because it's probably the best summon you can get under Dimension Shifter. It doesn't require anything like, you know, Mirror Jade is not live under Dimension Shifter, but if you can shut down your opponent from playing, maybe get in a Kaiju in the mix, which I like to do, the big Kaijus, pop them for a lot of damage, then attack with Dragoon and like an Aluber, that's just game on its own. So putting a lot of pressure on the board, plus Dimension Shifter allows you to live for one more turn and possibly even OTK your opponent. And the last one is going to be something that you already know, right? Performapal 5 Rainbow Magician. If you actually don't know this card, this is basically a Mystic Mine against Super Heavy Samurai, but also really good versus other decks as well. So what this card basically says is that if a player controls 0 set cards, they cannot activate monster effects and they cannot attack. And this is a pendulum effect, so you place it in the pendulum zone. But it also has another effect that if it's in the graveyard and you set a card, you can place this in your pendulum zone. So a really quirky combo to get this to work to being actually searchable is going through your branded combo with getting Albion into the graveyard during the end phase to set a card, but using Performapal 5 Rainbow Magician as your light material for branded fusion. So you fuse it away, you send it to the graveyard with Albaz, branded fusion. You go over into Albion, you get Albion into the graveyard somehow, you get to Grand Guignol with like fusion deployment, Cartesia, fuse it away, get it to the graveyard, end phase, you set a card, then Performapal 5 Rainbow actually triggers, placing it on the field. Now you're basically controlling a Mystic Mine versus your opponent. It's kind of a stretch. You can also summon it to the field with the new Despian Lulu because it's a spellcaster, which is light and also has attack equals to its own defense. So it's kind of funny if you want to play that as well. I think it's a solid tech card. I wouldn't necessarily play it, but I think it's good for you guys to know. So these have been 5 tech options for your main and side deck for the next format. Leave it down in the comments below. What tech cards are you playing that I didn't mention in this video? And of course, before we sign off, check out my new sponsor, sleevechief.de. Use code GALZO5 to get some of the most beautiful accessories and sleeves in the market. Thank you so much for watching. Leave a sub, leave a like. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.